Yes, there have been ET visitation, there have been crashed craft, there have been material and bodies recovered.
And I saw this person, and it had big eyes. That's all I saw about it, big eyes.
We just knew that they were not from this planet.
I couldn't believe it because what I was seeing wasn't possible.
It was like that, and then all of a sudden it just turned on its side, and I could see that it was a round disc.
One object approached us at very high speed. Was this a warning? Was this an attempt to communicate? Was this a weapon or just a probe? Just as suddenly as it appeared, click, it disappeared.
He never said anything. It's just that the face is the eyes.
There's no talking. It's all just images in the head. Telepathic communication.
They were trying to communicate, trying to tell us something. It was something to do with the environment.
I kept getting these thoughts and ideas in my mind of technology. Technology is not helping, technology is bad.
They want people to know that we're actually making harm on this world and we mustn't get too technologized.
After that, I was told that I would be prosecuted under the Official Secrets Act, and I was told that there wasn't anything there when I knew there was, and that I had to keep quiet about it.
You have not seen this, you do not talk about it, you'll be in trouble if you do.
The public has a right to know. We should allow people to make a judgment on what that might have been by disclosing.
My God. See that thing? It's hurting.
Declassified U.S. government documents and witness testimony from former or retired U.S. military personnel confirm beyond any doubt the reality of ongoing UFO incursions at nuclear weapons sites.
What you have heard here today is evidence of a phenomenon. It sounds fantastic, and it is fantastic.
Malmstrom was America's first line of nuclear defense. Its silos packed with Minutemen missiles, each one nearly 100 times more powerful than the bomb that devastated Hiroshima. Launch officers could, within minutes of confirmation, send their birds arcing 6,000 miles to incinerate key Soviet cities, triggering a war that would end our civilization.
Screaming into the phone saying they're looking a red glowing object hovering just above our front gate. Our missiles began going into what's called a no-go condition or unlaunchable. Essentially, they were disabled.
We have UFOs in the area.
These witnesses are some of the most highly vetted military officers in charge of the world's most devastating armaments. UFOs have been making incursions into top security nuclear facilities decade after decade.
To me, it's pretty clear. This is just, we're shining a light on this, we're pointing it out. What are you people doing with nuclear weapons?
These objects gave the impression that they wanted to be seen. With these enormous spotlights, there was no way that they were trying to hide. So why? That is the main question. Why do these objects want to be seen?
Nobody has to agree that why it's there, but shouldn't we at least be spending some money to study all these phenomena? Shouldn't we study this stuff?
Think about the possibilities, what we may discover technologically, how we might solve the energy crisis, how we might raise our standards of living.
Billy Meyer is a now 86-year-old Swiss man. He speaks a little English, but he no longer does interviews, so that's what I volunteered to do. He began, according to him, his contacts with an extraterrestrial man, 1942, when he was 5 years old, actually. His is the most documented life I know of. We have photographs going back to the age of 5 and all the way along the way. Somebody knew at that time, in 1942 in Switzerland, that it was going to be important to get photographic and other documentation on this man, who is today, and has been since then, the only actual extraterrestrial contactee, the only person with actual evidence, independently authenticated, analyzed and authenticated, of extraterrestrial manufacture. None of the hearings, none of the people making claims today have that. Only fuzzy videos and this and that. This is the hard evidence. 1,200 plus photos, in this period of time from about 1964 onward to 1981, over 1,200 photos, 8 films, a video in which he appears while he is in broad daylight videotaping a UFO hovering in a tree, and he zooms in on it. It's just the most amazing documentation. People can't handle it. Say it's too good to be true. It has to be a fake. But as you know, the late astronaut Gordon Cooper says, in 35 seconds, these photos are authentic. They're fine, very fine. He's meeting with extraterrestrials, and I don't know why anybody calls this man a hoaxer. It's the real thing. And it goes on and on. So he's somebody who, going back quite a way, has had an extraordinary life. Probably what I never shared with you before is that in the late 50s, early 60s, he was known as the Phantom in the Middle East. He was hired by police departments in West Pakistan, Turkey, and India to bring in serial killers and mass murderers. As a teenage boy, he'd run away from some juvenile detention thing to join the French Foreign Legion. He learns how to do all sorts of things that they teach. He decides, I don't want to be a killer. But he comes away with great skills. He had nerves of steel. It's like Lawrence of Arabia meets Luke Skywalker meets Indiana Jones. And people think, oh, some gray-bearded guy sitting in Switzerland. There have been 25 attempts in his life, as you say. There are 120 eyewitnesses. I am one of them. I've been within 20 feet. I've had 3 sightings of their craft. One was within 20 feet of him. That I consider still anecdotal. The hard evidence, the UFO photos, films, independently authenticated. Nobody has it. Nobody. But this is a higher standard of proof. And I was going to bring forward, I had 4 pages that I quickly ran off to bring for today, but I understand, let's deal with 5 or 6, whatever you want to do. We have, to a scientific and legal standard of proof, not only shown, and we have this documentation, that this involves space travel, of course, the information about Mars and black holes and all that. But when you go back and you're talking about things published in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s that only occur in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, that was done through time travel, and we prove it to a legal standard. Why, when we watch these hearings, a year ago you had me on to talk about the hearings then, that I turned over photographs to this committee from Representative Andre Carson. They censored the photos. The public never saw them. They should have. The same outcome is coming from these hearings. More chase your tail, because nice as they are, Representatives Luna and Tim Burchett, both of whom I've sent information to, never acknowledged. We can prove we sent it. They're not a match for the CIA. It's a government in and of itself, and you're not going to get the truth from an organization that admits they've been lying for 70 years,
right.
And now they're telling you the truth. So,
yeah.
Billy Meyer is shown, and in some cases just conversationally informed about things. He doesn't have to see everything for himself. He publishes it. And they do it because they have these alleged extraterrestrial human beings who are called the Plejaren, otherwise known in the fake UFO circles as Pleiadians. No such people exist. They feel a self-obligated mission to try to help us assure our own future survival. That goes back eons to when, according to the information in the case, their forefathers were among those who messed around a little bit with primitive Earth peoples at different epochs and misled people, represented themselves, as did other ETs, as the gods of our religions, and set things in motion that have caused a great deal of confusion and pain to humankind. Not the people that he's meeting with today, and he's met with them as recently as last week, but their forefathers, their ancestors. He's already published over 870 transcripts of these meetings with them, and there's others that have yet to be published, full of information, full of the warnings about what's coming, what can be avoided, and what probably can't. We're not here to scare people, but that's what the story is. Some things, we have enough in books that it's legal standard to prove, but some things you will actually be able to, and maybe have to in some cases, use the Wayback Machine online and find where we first published something, and then from Meyer, and then it occurs. Because when this started to be published officially, 1975, officially disseminated in the world, they're running it off on what were called mimeograph machines at the time, and publishing in German, and then binding everything into these big blocks, these books. So all this stuff, the earliest stuff, has all been published from the get-go in German. The English language translations came subsequent. They started in about 1978. We have the books. people will be able to see this. And then if they have questions or challenges for proof, can you prove this one? Then they get in touch with me and I see how well I can satisfy their thing. But when you have a preponderance of evidence, listen, if you have somebody that literally you can prove they published it 20 years ago. February 23rd, 2020, I received a document. It had a dozen specific warnings. You see the document, dozen specific warnings about this coming pandemic. We are the first people in English to not theorize, but to publish the fact that this was to be a pandemic. It would effectively be spread by a lot of asymptomatic spreaders. Children would be the first hidden spreaders. The WHO would be, and China would be largely responsible, a bunch of things, and an interesting recommendation in there about the need for hermetically sealed environments. So people who look at that and read it, let me now explain. I published that documentation 2 days later. I read through it, and that was on February 25th, 2020, I believe. Everything in that document there, that's a dozen. There are over 40 more specific examples of the information, and Meyer published it. We can prove all of that, and he published it before anybody else, CDC, WHO. For the trouble of sending this around through the state in which I live, Arizona, when there were 5 cases in the state on March 2nd, we had zero coverage. We were told it would not be published, it would not be investigated.
Another one. Let's go into this. The Jupiter IO information. I'm fascinated about this. In 1978, can you explain the Voyager missions in 1978 or the Jupiter IO information in 1978? What is this about?
The Jupiter mission was in process in 78. It would end up taking some very important photographs in 1979 of and around Jupiter and its moons. Somewhere around October, maybe 15th or 18th of 1978, Billy Meyer publishes a transcript in one of those bound early published books. We have it, we've got the dates, and I'll be able to show everybody. He is discussing with an alleged extraterrestrial woman, Jupiter and its moon, Io. And he states, as I recall, Io, you told me, is the most volcanically active body in the solar system. And the ejecta from its volcanoes, that part of the ejecta that escapes the gravitational pull of that moon, is taken up into the torus around Jupiter. The rest of it falls down onto the moon, and it accounts for the unnaturally smooth surface of a moon. And it goes on and on about this thing, and goes on to more information about Jupiter. Well, I believe, and I use that word because I want to make sure that, I'm pretty sure March 12th, 1979, JPL NASA announces the single most important discovery of the Voyager mission, and that is that Io is the most volcanically active body in the solar system. How could Billy Meyer in 1978, and this information is carried to the U.S., by the way, by Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens. He reports, I've had this information in my possession since March 9th, 3 days before NASA makes the announcement. How does he, and it turns out skeptics jumped on this to attack it, and they started posting articles about the Jupiter mission and all of this, and a year later, JPL NASA comes out with another finding which corroborates the 1978 information. The skeptics inadvertently support and publish post-Meyer information that corroborates it.
Icelandic volcano erupting. Of course, there's live streams right now over the past week that have been dedicated. They literally have cameras on the Icelandic volcanoes going off right now. But tell us about this. He predicted this. When did he predict this?
The first time was in 1948, and then again more recently, I think it's 2012. So it's the 2012 one in which, it's right there. And along with that,
what did he say?
There's a lot of it.
What did he say would happen?
He listed that it's another place where the volcanic activity is going to be highly destructive, and they listed in the earliest ones, they list different countries, like Japan and different places where Italy and what have you, where there's going to be severe volcanic activity. One that I didn't list, I sent information in, there is something called the Eiffel Fields in Germany, which will turn into a sea of fire. There's no date given on that. They stopped giving dates, but they gave certain markers. If we get to the stuff about Italy, you're going to find that very fascinating.